How would you describe the relationship between funk and Cincinnati in your own words?
You know, it's close knit because of King Records, but also there is a uniformity of shows that when I was growing up, there were soul shows, soul reviews coming to town at the Gardens, places like that. So this town used its R&B base and used its R&B fans really well, and there were just almost as many back in. There weren't that many concerts before the Beatles or anything for me or anything, but there were always soul reviews coming to town. So there was always a bond between the city and funk and soul because there was this hardcore market for us. Cincinnati has been very receptive, was very receptive to soul and R&B and funk mid 50s, early 60s. It really was, more than anything else.
Was U.S. Bank built after funk had kind of ran its course? Or?
Yeah, it was. It was. Most of the funk shows were over here at the Gardens.
Okay.
Cincinnati Gardens.
Okay. Now, Pat was saying you have some personal experience with King Records.
No, I just, like I said, I pressed. My mom worked at Wright Records, and they would contract out to press 45s because they made so many of them. And Wright Record was one of the places that would press James Brown records and would press James Brown 45s. And most, like I said, it was Cold Sweat and Hot Pants. So that was the relationship with King. But I did get to see how many records they sell just by the sheer volume of records and 45s that we pressed every day.
Okay. Do you know of any physical elements of the history of funk that still exist in Cincinnati today? If someone were to want to go see a landmark or a...
There's a couple of places. There's a place down on Vine Street. I don't know if it's still there or not. It's called the Viking Lounge. They had a lot of soul bands and blues bands there. There used to be, they just, there's still some remnants of King over in Oakley, but I'm not really sure if the remains are, if they're still there or not. And then, like I said, there were probably some other venues that I didn't know about or know where they were that might still exist. If not as a bar, maybe as a landmark, a cornerstone on a corner, or maybe just an empty building, I don't know.
Yeah. Now, King Records offices are no longer...
No, there is no.
They no longer... the building that they were in downtown, do you have any idea?
Well, it was over in Oakley.
That was where their headquarters were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Over in Evanston, yeah.
Okay. Now, I just asked you about physical elements that might still exist. This is kind of a more broad question, but what about cultural elements? Obviously, funk is not nearly as popular mainstream today as it was, but are there any cultural elements of funk that you still see in Cincinnati specifically?
Oh yeah, I mean a lot of the bands from the area now that are on the road, like Bootsy Collins and Zapp and other artists like that, they have a foundation of funk. There's not that many of the songwriters from this town compared to the funk band. So there's a big connection. Funk Incorporated, Bootsy Collins, George Clinton. I mean, the funkier side of music today that's out there, I think was really spawned from King Records, and the fact that there's a good basis for funk from a lot of local bands shows me that the Cincinnati bands did more of the funky stuff, and that's a good connection to the past.
Yeah. Okay. So some people would say that Cincinnati is sort of the birthplace of funk.
I don't know. Again, I don't know where else it was as entrenched as it is here. So I don't know that I can say that it is or is not.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be some places that I'm unfamiliar with that were doing it before. But if you look at the King Records from the 50s with Little Willie John and people like that, there weren't a lot of soul records before that. So King was right on the cusp of when funk was breaking, and if they didn't break it, they were really close to it, because when you look at a gold mine, or when you look at a book that tells you values of records, we don't use those, but it's got dates. And you look at some of the King artists, they go back to 55 and 56. It'd be hard pressed for me to say there's too many other labels or too many other bands that were around before then. So the mid 50s is when King really started to put out product. I would think they were one of the first, if not the original, to put out funk records.
Now Obviously, King Records is long gone, is not around today.
Yeah.
What ended up happening to King Records?
I-71. No, it cut right through. Well, that's not really too far from the truth.
Yeah.
But I don't know. When I was pressing the records back in '68 and '69, it was all done manually. Then all of a sudden, they started to ship out and do the things. The recording studios got bigger, other places. And they weren't really signing that many artists. So I think time caught up with them in the fact that they weren't really re-signing too many of the artists that were of the day.
Yeah.
And funk started to fade, and disco started to happen, and then all of a sudden, there just wasn't a market. Just like when Jewel went out of business in Mount Healthy, the pressing plants got fancier, and the older school pressing plants where they did them by hand, they just kind of got caught up in modernization.
Yeah, it seems like relative to other genres like jazz or even hip hop today, funk's golden era was relatively short-lived.
It really was. It really was. It was spawned with the blues, but back in my day, unfortunately, to a limited audience.
Yeah.
More people would listen to WSAI than would listen to WCIN. So it was a limited audience. It really wasn't a record-buying audience. So it was a smaller market than was the WSLWs, WSAIs, things like that. WDAO and WCIN had their listeners, but it was a smaller market, and it really wasn't that big of a record-buying public. And to be honest, it was sometimes very hard to find soul records in this town.
Yeah.
Some of the stores downtown had them, but it was kind of hard to find soul records for sale when they play them. But smaller market, smaller stations, less wattage. Bigger stations that played the Beatles and Beach Boys or Frank Sinatra for W. So that was the big thing,
So you mentioned a lot of radio stations. Was there any one radio station in particular that?
WCIN.
WCIN.
WCIN was then Dayton was WDAO. A lot of the urban stations back then were the initials of the towns.
Okay.
So CIN, DAO.
I gotcha.
But there was a jazz station, and I know I'm not going to remember it. Oh my goodness. There was a jazz station that played hip jazz, but it was a smaller market too. So really, there was a market for jazz and R&B in this town. It was just very small, very limited.
Okay. Do you know anything about how Bootsy Collins got his start?
I really don't. I don't. I'd be guessing if I did.
Okay.
I just know that when it happened, he fell in with the right people, and he had the charisma. I just say, knowing his ability, knowing his charisma, knowing what a great person he is. Somebody spotted him and said, "Hey, this guy's got it.
Yeah.
This guy's got everything you need."
Yeah.
And it was lucky that he kept it in town for a while.
Yeah. And what about James Brown? Did he have origins in Cincinnati?
No, he came from South Carolina, Atlanta, recorded here, but no origins here. He was from the South. I think it was either South Carolina or Atlanta. Or Savannah. He was from Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he recorded here.
Okay. Do you know of any notable records or songs in particular that he might have recorded
Oh, yeah.
in the city?
It's a Man's World. Please, 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 please. Hot Pants. It's a Man's World. Cold Sweat. They were all recorded.
And they're recorded right over there in Oakley?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I could be wrong on that. I've always assumed that a lot of them were.
Okay.
And there was a it was a recording studio there. So.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but he might have recorded them down in Atlanta. I know they got pressed up here.
Okay. Well, this next one's kind of tough, and I'm asking you to make a prediction, and if you don't have one, that's fine. But funk, like we discussed, some would consider Cincinnati the birthplace of funk. It certainly is heavily attributed to Cincinnati.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the city has the potential, has the musical infrastructure and the culture to spawn another genre, or at least to be considered the birthplace or heavily affiliated with another genre? And if so, do you have any idea?
Yeah, there's a lot of good indie groups that come out of this town, but they're all over the place.
Yeah. And
you'll see the festivals this summer or this fall, and bands will be here from all over. They're all good. I would have thought maybe maybe 20 years ago that we might have fostered a really good, so maybe we fostered a really good indie scene back in, the early to mid 90s,
Yeah.
late 80s. So maybe there's nothing new down the line, but I think this town did help foster alternative music, indie labels, stuff like that. It just was a while ago. What's on the future? You never know. You can't tell. You never know. But I don't know what kind of music's left. There's really not a. It's really not. It's a good blues scene, but blues has happened before.
Yeah.
There's kind of like a techno, but that's all over the place too. So I don't know. I would imagine we could foster some kind of a genre. I just don't know what's next. I don't know what's coming next.
Sure.
I didn't see the electronica coming. It came out. It existed. If you'd asked me 25 years ago what's coming next, I probably would have said, well, some local groups. I never even really knew about that electronic stuff, which happened. So we could spawn some new kind of music, some kind of music that might resonate from here. But what it is, I don't know.
Do you think, just with the progress that the internet has made and how connected people are, that it's going to be difficult in the future for a genre to be so heavily associated with the city like grunge was in Seattle?
I really do. I just think with the internet and everything like that, it's going to be really hard for any style of music to gain a foothold, just because of the divergence of the cultures, and now the way you get your music and the way you load your iPods and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's just going to be. It's a different way about going about getting your music, and a different way associating your music with a certain location. So it's going to be difficult. Yeah.
Okay. Were you a funk fan yourself? I know you.
No, I like it now more so than I did when I was growing up. I was more the Beatles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've been here now, like I said, for 25 years, and before here I worked at Swallow's and immersed myself in music that I hadn't really heard before, and hadn't really attributed it to anything other than I just didn't listen to it. And now I see what I missed, and I'm trying to catch up, and it's a process I'll never do. But I didn't listen to it. Now I wish I had. I'm just trying to catch up.
Yeah. Who did the big funk artists play to in town? Like, what kind of crowd was listening?
Again, probably your urban listeners. I know some other guys, some guys that were into funk bands, white guys that were into funk bands, but it was mostly an urban crowd. But I do know when these guys said that when they would go to these reviews, even if they were in the minority as far as being white or black, they felt part of the show.
Yeah.
And they said they'll go to concerts now, or back in the same day, and you didn't feel this oneness. They go to those funk shows, and it was like everybody were brothers, and they just loved it. So they would say that the funk shows were the best shows they ever saw.
Okay. This is real broad, and if you don't have an answer, then that's fine. But just to wrap it up, basically, any last thoughts on the relationship between funk and Cincinnati? Any way to sum it up, really? How it affected the city?
The more I think about it, the more I do think that this town may have been the forerunner. Birthplace is a tough word to use.
Yeah.
But it may have had, funk may have had its origins in this town. And I think the lasting relationship that this town has with funk is that it's spawned a style of music that never sounds dated.
Yeah.
Some rock music just sounds dated.
Yeah.
A lot of things sound dated. Blues and funk. You couldn't tell whether it's a band from today or a band from the 50s unless it's the quality of the record playing. You hear it's monaural.
Yeah.
So, I would say that it spawned a style of music that knows no time barriers, is limitless in what it can be, and is timeless in its sound.